Hey everybody, this is John for MTG Nexus with a playback of another Izzet Phoenix League post-banning of Faithless Looting and unbanning of Stoneforge Mystic. So this list is very similar to what we ran the first time around. The one couple of changes are a couple charted courses in the main deck, cut a Lava Dart, cut a Lightning Axe to fit those in the main deck. We also put some gut shots in the main deck over the Force of Negations that were previously there. So a lot of small little iteration changes trying to maximize the number of discard outlets while still having utility and spells. Izzet Charm's flexibility has proven to be very complicating because sometimes we want to use this in its other modes, such as the Spell Pierce mode, the deal shock mode to things like Stoneforge Mystic and such. So actually the flexibility of this card has made things very complicated in trying to figure out how to rebuild Izzet Phoenix. Sideboard, there were a couple suggestions from someone wanting me to play a specific list. I told them very nicely that I only play specific lists if someone donates. That said, if you are interested in donating to see a specific build of Phoenix Blade or Burn or any deck, there's a donation link in the upper right hand corner of the YouTube channel where you can donate $10 to see a specific list played, and then email me the list on my email, which is linked in every single video, mtgotavern@gmail.com. That said, I did like a couple of their ideas, particularly the card Seasoned Pyromancer as kind of a grindier card in a 1-0 Shattering Blow. It comes in handy against things like Wormcoil Engine and Snaring Bridge protected by a welding jar, etc. So there are some situations where having an exile effect for artifacts is nice. So I went with a 1-0 split on a Braid and Shattering Blow. Bloodman's still a very solid card in the Izzet build here. Surgical Extraction still pretty decent in a lot of spots if you can kill one of your opponent's win cons or they use one of their removal spells, you can potentially extract it. Pretty decent against things like Dredge, which Dredge still exists despite the banning. We shaved some cards. Dragon's Claw is here because I still expect there to be a lot of burn and red decks in the format. Anger of the Gods still a hedge against creature-based decks. Can come in a pinch against more creature-based Stoneforge Mystic decks, things like the Vizier combo, etc. A couple copies of Force of Negation here. Protecting creatures is very important in this format, and then Spell Pierce is kind of a secondary counterspell. Relevant against the blue-white Stoneblade decks, Tron, etc. So lots of spaces where we could see these Force of Negations and Spell Pierces come in. Other than that, we're trying a very basic pre-ban list, except for we don't have Faithless Looting. Played Gut Shot in this league. I'll cover my thoughts in kind of the wrap-up here. Gut Shot didn't perform particularly well. There isn't a whole lot in the format that's X1 that we want to kill. Surgical Extraction doesn't feel like it's necessarily in the best place either as a free spell. So it's looking more and more like the Turbo Phoenix plans kind of going out the window. Other things to consider, couple different directions the deck can take. Javier Dominguez posted a list that involved no copies of Arclight Phoenix, and then going back to the Pyromancer's Ascension, Aria of Flame, kill with things like Noxious Revival and Manamorphose. Basically what ended up happening is you put a Pyromancer's Ascension in play, get 2 counters on it, and then the combination of Manamorphose and Noxious Revival can allow you to basically infinitely loop and then generate infinite mana. Then from there you can draw, I believe you can draw your entire deck with some different variation in the loop, and then Aria of Flame, if you happen to have an Aria of Flame in play somewhere during that mess you get to kill them just by Aria of Flame triggers. That list is something we'll certainly explore in the future. For right now, I'm still trying to find a way to play the actual Arclight Phoenix to make it still Izzet Phoenix or a Phoenix variant. As we'll get into the matches, I think the ironic part is, even if they hadn't banned Faithless Looting, that I don't think Izzet Phoenix would be in a very good place in the meta right now. over the weekend I played in an MCQ with Burn. I'm seeing a lot of Burn, Jun, Stoneblade decks. There was still a smattering of other things. People were still trying to play Eldrazi Tron, regular Tron, Storm. There was a couple of Dredge decks. There were some Urza decks. Basically, what I'm trying to say is there's a whole lot of bad matchups for traditional Izzet Phoenix out there pre-banning. So I'm not sure, even if Phoenix was still at full strength, that this would be a good choice in the meta right now, and that the deck would maybe have to adapt anyway. And now that Faithless Looting is banned, there are some changes that need to be made to the deck. A couple different directions the deck can go. Can continue to try to play 4 Izzet Charm, try to play a more Izzet Phoenix fair plan here. It's a little bit harder. Our axes aren't quite as good. Thing in the Ice is still a solid card, but not good in a field full of a bunch of removal. Arc like Phoenix is still good when you're able to bring them back with Finalia Promises, or instantly discard them to like a Lightning Axe or something. But I think one of the big problems is the deck needs to get a grindier element to it. And we'll cover that kind of in the wrap-up video, but I did want to give some initial thoughts on the format and where the Izzet Phoenix deck is overall. But that said, let's get into some matches. Alright, we're back here for match number 1. We'll be on the play. This hand is reasonable. Got a couple different plans here. We have the Thing in the Ice plan potentially. Could also go for the double Phoenix plan. Thought Scour is a little bit awkward since we already have 2 Phoenixes in our hand. But still, I think overall a reasonable keep. Play the Scalding Tarn. When it plays a Mountain and pass. We fetch. Let's grab a tap land here in the face of a Mountain. Go ahead and play out our Thing in the Ice. We get bolted. It plays an Eidolon. So pretty clearly we're up against Burn here. I'm going to place a Fanatical Firebrand. Goes to attacks. Go ahead and block here. Let our opponent play another Eidolon. In response to that, I choose to draw 2 and discard 2. Trying to set up maybe the Phoenix's next turn, flipping Thing in the Ice. I think the correct play might have been to just go ahead and kill this Eidolon there. But we're in a rough spot either way. So, we're on tap. Izzet Charm one of the Eidolons here, trying to minimize the damage we take. However, it turns out that flip that. The Phoenix is back. Leave one of the Phoenixes back to have a defense against a hasty creature. However, our opponent just has the bolt, so we're dead. Hard to say what the right line there was with the Izzet Charm, whether it was to kill one of the Eidolons with the Eidolon in the stack or the draw discard. I don't know that we were going to be able to get anywhere with cards we already had in hand against 2 Eidolons anyway. And this is one of the things I was kind of talking about in the deck tech, was the fact that one of Izzet Charm's flexibilities, or powers, is in its flexibility. It's not particularly mana efficient in anything that it does. However, there's a problem with that flexibility because the reason we want that card is mainly as the discarder for Arclight Phoenixes. But it's really potentially possible that we need to consider other discard outlets. That's part of the reason I had Charted Courses in this list. Other people have suggested things like Tormenting Voice, Cathartic Reunion, etc. I think the problem with those cards is the draw discard, or discard draw effect is kind of prohibitive, especially if the spell gets countered. Radical Idea is just so mana inefficient, it's ridiculous. Spending 4 mana to discard a Phoenix, it's not realistic. There are some other ideas I have to consider after this league, but I'll get into that in the quick wrap up. Basically, we got burned out by a mono red burn deck. It looks like they're just straight up mono red, kind of a budget version, but even a budget version of burn is still pretty rough for a Phoenix. Well, let's get into sideboarding and game number 2. So as far as sideboarding for game number 2, I sideboarded out the gut shots and the lava dart, even though our opponent showed us the Fanatical Firebrand. I brought in 1 copy of a Braid, as well as the Spell Pierces and the 1 Spell Pierce that was in our sideboard and 2 Force of Negations. I only ended up registering a 14-card sideboard, which was kind of unfortunate. I forgot to get the extra Spell Pierce in the deck, and then I also cut an additional Chart of Course to get those extra spells in there. The Chart of Course is a little bit clunky. I have it mainly as another discard outlet. It's not the most efficient spell, especially in Modern. This hand... I can't remember if I end up keeping this hand. These hands are often traps. Having 4 business spells and no cantrips. So I end up mulliganing to this. This hand's pretty reasonable. We could potentially have the quick Phoenix turn. End up putting the Sleight of Hand to the bottom, as Serum Visions has the Deepest Dig. We find a couple of lands. One has turn 1 Goblin Guide. I think I end up keeping the Chart of Course, which might have been a mistake here. Plan on discarding the Phoenixes, and then the following turn hopefully getting back our Phoenixes here. Once again, this is an example of the Phoenix plan being slowed down by a turn. If that was a Faithless Looting, we could have gone for Manamorphose. I have the option to play Thing in the Ice here, but I decided to go with the Phoenix plan instead. We go ahead and bolt the Goblin Guide, get back our Phoenixes, start pressuring our opponent. Opponent here has Seal of Fire, hits us for whatever. We have to take a damage off our Fiery Islet. Go ahead and bolt their creature, trying to save ourselves from dying once this to this in a bolt. They do have 4 cards in hand, so there's a good chance we're just dead anyway. Continue pressuring our opponent, play the land out. We have the bolt, untap, and bolt us. So, once again, burn in a variety, not a good matchup for Phoenix. The fact that we are now delayed a turn from deploying our Arclight Phoenixes also is problematic. I honestly think in this particular case, we would have been able to race if this was a normal Faithless Looting build. Obviously, Faithless Looting is banned now. This is one example of where I don't know the deck can rely on trying to race these aggro decks anymore. So once again, considerations must be made towards possibly rebuilding the deck. As far as what path that takes, once again, a couple considerations. We'll cover that in the wrap-up. Anyways, on to match number 2. Back for match number 2 in this league. This hand's a little bit risky. We have 2 Arclight Phoenixes in our hand. We don't have a discard outlet, and we only have 1 land. Obviously, the Sleight of Hand is likely to help us find a land. So, opponent goes, turn 1, Watery Grave into Serum Visions. This is another deck that I've been somewhat surprised to see popping back up, and that is Grixis Death Shadow. So we Sleight of Hand, we find a Fiery Islet, opponent Thought Scours themselves, they shock in here. We go ahead, try to hit a discard spell or something. We obviously miss. I could bolt our opponent's face here. I kind of figured they might be on Death Shadow here, and I didn't really want to aid in them growing in their Death Shadows. Unfortunately, they're on the Delve plan. So, just pass here. Starts hitting us. Wait till the end of turn here. I start bolting our opponent. Problem we have here is the fact that one of our 2 red sources is the Fiery Islet. It's possible I should have started deploying, or I couldn't actually deploy these Arclight Phoenixes, and I should have fetched a basic mountain here instead. That way I could still kind of lava dart and gut shot our opponent. But our opponent has... I'm guessing this is the end. Nope. Opponent gets us with the Gurmag Angler. I do that. Lava spike them. Go ahead and cast this thing in the ice, hopefully to be a chump blocker this turn. Opponent brings a Snapcaster Mage. They Thought Scour instead of bolting us, which was just kind of silly. Because we would have been dead, and then I have to block here. Try to gut shot the Snapcaster Mage, and then they just had the Stubborn Denial for the gut shot, so we're dead anyway. Because we're at 1. So Fiery Islet being once again a little bit awkward when our opponent's trying to aggro us out, and the fact that, you know, we don't have a ton of great removal for X5s in our deck. So, anywho, on to sideboarding. Taking a look at the sideboarding, we go ahead and board out the gut shots and the lava dart. Did I choose to bring in here even? Didn't bring in the counter spells, which might be a little bit odd, but their deck is very heavy creature based as well. So maybe I should be bringing in at least the spell pierces against their discard spells and such, but Force Negation felt like maybe a little bit of a lost cause. What other cards were there to bring in against them? Bring in the Surgicals. I guess it looks like I brought in the 2-season Pyromancers and the copies of Blood Moon, it looks like. So it looks like I brought in a bunch of 3-drop creatures against their Inquisition, Thoughtseize, Stubborn Denial deck. Don't know if that's necessarily the correct strategy there. But, and then boarded out Gut Shots and Lava Darts, because they're not very good in the matchup. So, and they can potentially punk the opponent out, but we'll be on the play here. This hand's fairly reasonable. Once again, we have the double Arclight Phoenix hand, which is really awkward without an Izzet Charm, or a Chart of Course, or a Lightning Axe. But, opponent goes and shocks in. Thoughtseize us, take the thing in the ice. A cycle, play a Death Shadow on turn 2, which is kind of obnoxious. I go ahead and cycle our Manamorphose here, which might have been a mistake. Might have been correct to try to wait for that until turn 3, where we could have a lot better chance of double spelling. I was trying to hit a land for a Blood Moon. We don't get lucky. We bolt the Death Shadow. They don't seem to have a response. Go ahead and Thought Scour there. Serum Visions, looking for another threat. We go ahead and Manamorphose. Once again, missed on a land. Thought Scour ourselves. Mill a Mountain. Opponent bolts our face. Serum Visions again. Here comes another Delve threat. Probably a Gurmag Angler. Our deck's not exactly well equipped to stand up to that. We're behind on board now, so our things are looking pretty poor here. They dismember our thing in the ice. Play a Death Shadow. We try to play Aria Flame. They have the Stubborn Denial, and then we're just dead on board. Aria Flame, if this would have resolved. Obviously, their last card in hand being a stub, kind of annoying, but if this would have resolved, we at least would have had one turn. Maybe found our one of Lightning Axe to try to kill the Gurmag Angler. Seasoned Pyromancer was not castable. Once again, this Fiery Islet, a little bit annoying, dealing us damage throughout against a semi-aggressive matchup. So, kind of a frustrating start to the league so far, but, you know, Stubborn Denial, Aria Flame, it's what this deck does best. I'm not really sure what's trying to bring back the Grixis Death Shadow. For a long while, the Mardu Shadow has been the version of choice since the printing of the 3-drop 1 white tutor creature they had. But, I don't know. I've seen Grixis pop up here, and I also saw it pop up at the MCQ in a couple different times. So I think it's interesting that Grixis is trying to make a resurgence back into a format full of Jund and Blue-White Stoneblade, but alas, it's a very powerful strategy, and it's kind of a foil to our blue-red mid-range deck that doesn't have very good removal for things like Death Shadow and Grimag Angler. Anyways, on to match number 3. Here we are for match number 3. This hand looks pretty reasonable. We don't have a threat, but we do have a couple bolts, Manamorphose, and some cantrips, so this hand could turn out to be anything. Opponent mulliganing, apparently. Go ahead and do that. Serum Visions. What do I choose to do with the show game log? Up here like it wants to show us the game log. Anywho, I believe I top both or bottom both. I'm not sure. I guess we'll find out. Opponent goes turn 1. Botanical Sanctum, Serum Visions, my alarm bells are automatically going off here. Thought Scour to get the Arclight Phoenix in the graveyard. May not have been the best choice of mana this turn, but it's one guaranteed way to get Arclight into the graveyard. Probably keep the mountain here. Opponent goes Serum Visions into Temple, which was interesting. So I'm definitely picking up some Neo brand vibes here. We go ahead and Manamorphose. Get some pressure into play here. Manamorphose again. Get a thing in the ice. Go ahead and bolt our opponents. Get the Arclight Phoenix back. Allosaurus Riders, Neoforms, Gristle Brands start doing the thing. They get to Nourishing Shoal with Autochron Worm, gain a bunch of life. Draw some more life, does the thing. Draws through their deck, plays Laboratory Maniac, and then draws deck and kills us. So we would have held up Bolt at some point. We potentially could have killed them, but I really can't afford to wait around. We need to pressure their life total. Once again, the awkwardness of Izzet Charm versus Faithless Looting. If this was Faithless Looting, we could have potentially flashed it back. And Izzet Charm's a very interesting interaction card, especially in a matchup like this, where if you get to untap on turn 2, you can hold this up, potentially stop the Neoform combo. So, once again, I think Izzet Charm is a worthwhile addition exploring to the deck. I just don't know that it solves all the problems we want with Faithless Looting, especially since we frequently want to use the other modes. We want to use the Spell Pierce mode. We want to use the Shock mode. You know, and it doesn't flash back, so if we happen to Thought Scour, it doesn't have that value. So, you need to find a way to kind of combat this problem. Another thing with the removal of Faithless Looting is we don't have a lot of sorceries to flash back with Finale of Promise. And Finale of Promise is one of the best ways to flip our thing in the ice, put counters on our Aria of Flame, get back our Arclight Phoenixes. So, a lot of difficulties in trying to figure out what the best build of an Arclight Phoenix still version of the deck is. But anyways, let's get into sideboarding for this Neo brand matchup. We are taking a look at sideboarding for the Neo brand matchup. I boarded out the Aria Flames and the Gut Shots and the Lava Spikes. Boarded in the Blood Moons. Their deck is extremely vulnerable to Blood Moon effects, especially if, say, they cast a Summoner's Pact and we happen to run out a Blood Moon and they don't have a Manamorphose. They're just dead, even if they have the correct amount of mana to play. Other cards we brought in were the 2 copies of Force of Negation, the 1 copy of Spell Pierce that's actually in the sideboard, and then we boarded out the Aria Flames, the Abrades, and the Gut Shots. It's important to pressure their life total as much as you can, leaving in the Lightning Bolts specifically for that purpose as well. Might have been incorrect to leave in the Lightning Axe, but it is kind of important to have discard outlets for our Phoenixes. So, be on the play this game. Obviously, if we get to untap turn 2, This Izzet Phoenix is a pretty nice hedge. And then just go ahead and run this out. See remissions on 1. Oh, I brought in the surgical extractions, because that's another thing if you're able to like stop their combo or something. But this happened. Turn to Gristlebrand. Plays a Summoner's Pact to grab an Autochron Worm. Nourishing Shoal, draw a bunch of cards. They do the thing, draw a bunch more cards. They have 6 cards left in their deck. They play a Laboratory Maniac and concede the game. Basically, what my opponent explained was their 4th copy of Nourishing Shoal was in their last 5 cards of their library, so they didn't have enough life to pay for Nourishing Shoal, and the fact that they had Summoner's Pact means they were dead on their next upkeep. So, I conceded the game. We didn't do anything, their deck just fizzled. So, kind of frustrating that there's a deck like this in the format still, but, you know, we gotta win in this game, so really can't complain. On to game number 3. On game number 3, we're on the draw. Sideboarding, yep, didn't really change anything on the sideboarding here. So, have the counter spells, we have the surgical extractions in case we're able to get a little bit lucky with countering something. This hand's reasonable. It's entirely dependent on hitting a second land off this sleight of hand, which is a little bit risky, but I still think we have to try. Opponent mulliganed pretty low here. They miss on their thing. We go ahead and sleight of hand. We miss as well. Take the Izzet Charm. Opponent does the thing. We Thought Scour, trying to hit a land. We don't flip a land, but we don't hit a land either. Opponent does the thing. They Manamorphose. Finally hit a second land, put a thing in the ice into play. Opponent continues to brick a little bit. We hold up Izzet Charm from this point on if possible. At this point I Thought Scour, starting to get counters off of our thing. Manamorphose here. Doing Bolt. I could have potentially just drawn and discarded, but I wanted to keep open the possibility of double Izzet Charm in future turns. Take a Lightning Bolt. Go ahead and do this. It's possible I was supposed to Bolt plus Surgical Extraction here, just on the Manamorphose alone. See what they got going on, put them to 7, and then put them to Arclight Phoenix next turn. But let them do the thing. They untap and concede the game because obviously they don't draw what they need to and figure we're just going to kill them. And we still have these 2 Izzet Charms the whole time to keep from either Eldritch Evolution or copies of whatchamacallit coming down here. Or Eldritch Evolution or Neoform coming down. So this kind of reminds me of a couple of games I've seen recently of just kind of get the Awoken Horror flipped and kind of win the game. I think these kind of tempo-esque games are going to be potentially the norm. This is very similar to the strategy that the Stoneforge Mystic decks are looking to employ. So it's worthwhile considering, the consideration of things like Izzet Charm. The Blue Moon decks do this. They often play a thing in the ice and then use things like, Mana Leak, Spell Snare, Cryptic Command to kind of protect their Awoken Horrors. It is one consideration of the route you can take with, these blue-red mid-range decks. Do something like Awoken Horror, Narset, play a more controlling game. You could play the Javier Dominguez, like Team Lotus Box version of the deck, from the pre-banning minus the copies of Arclight Phoenix, and playing Pyromancer's Ascension. Basically a Thing Ascension deck with an infinite combo to kill. But I think just showing this is kind of important, that there are certain matchups where you can play a more tempo game, flip your thing in the ice, play a more tempo-ish kind of game with things like Izzet Charm, Mana Leak, etc., but still playing enough at instant speed to flip your thing in the ice while never taking your counterspell wall down against a combo deck. is one thing important that I wanted to show in this particular matchup, even if this is not. This matchup is more entirely on what our opponent's doing than what we're doing, but it was nice to get a win in this league, and I wanted to show this kind of like tempo-y kind of game plan that the deck can implement with Thing in the Ice still. In Arc-Light Phoenix, I think, is also an important part of that. Being able to clock your opponent is important. Just understand that the fast draws really aren't there anymore. But anyways, let's get on to match number 4. We're back here for match number 4. Fortunately, we're on the draw. This hand's pretty reasonable. We have a Thing in the Ice. Gut Shot's kind of whatever. It's a way to flip our thing much more quickly. Have the Metamorphose Izzet Charm combo, so if we find a Phoenix or something, there's potential we could easily flip things pretty quickly. Unfortunately, we see a Hallowed Fountain. Our opponent goes Stoneforge Mystic here. Grab Sword of Feast and Famine. We go ahead and Thought Scour ourselves. Pass turn. I could deploy Thing in the Ice here, but I choose to kill the Stoneforge Mystic instead. Our opponent plays 3 Fairy here. Ticks up. Makes it a little bit more difficult for us. Makes our Aria Flame that much worse. We just play Thing in the Ice here. They bounce it. Play another Stoneforge Mystic. Get a Batter Skull. Go ahead and play that. Go ahead and try to flip the thing here. Which I'll admit it's a long shot, but gotta try to find a bull or something to kill this thing anyway. May as well get some value out of it. We find Izzet Charm, which obviously is a little bit late to the party. They path our dude. They pass turn again. We play Aria Flame. They have Spell Queller. This is where I kind of punt here. I forget that with Teferi in play, you don't get the spell back from Spell Queller. So I kill a Spell Queller and then promptly can't cast our Aria Flame, and then we just kind of dead here to the combination of this plus Batter Skull plus Feast and Famine, so I go ahead and scoop it up. These blue-white decks are blue-white Stoneblade decks are just going to be a thing moving forward. I don't think we were in terrible shape in this game. Obviously, they have a bunch of cards in hand, and our threats don't necessarily line up great against what they have going on. Aria Flame, if it would have resolved, might have been alright, but this is basically blue-white control with a threat now. They don't play quite as many controlling cards, but they still have a lot of disruption elements. Not the best of things for even the old versions of Izzet Phoenix. Basically, your Phoenixes were the best way to combat this, and that element of our game plan has been severely weakened. So, on to sideboarding for game number 2. So for the sideboarding, I did very similar to what I did when I was using Tariq Patel's list. Sideboarding out Things in the Ice. Also boarded out the Gut Shots and the Lava Darts, boarded out the Finale of Promises, and boarded in basically everything else. We boarded in Blood Moons. We boarded in Seasoned Pyromancer. We boarded in the Spell Pierces and the Force of Negations. Basically anything that interacted with what they did or trying to set up the Aria Flame combo, and still leaving Izzet Phoenixes in the deck. So, whole lot of boarded out, whole lot of boarded in. See how this goes. Gotta leave the bolts in against the copies of Stoneforge Mystic, obviously. This hand is interesting. We have Blood Moon here. Go ahead and pass. Gives us the option to Thought Scour and Spell Pierce. We draw an Island, which is nice. Take the Lava Axe, so we have an out to Stoneforge Mystic. Kind of sucks that we have to go up on our ability to cast give up on our ability to discard a Arc-Light Phoenix there when we took this Lightning Axe, but I think we need the answer to Stoneforge Mystic too much. Then it turns out our opponent's on Jeskai, and it's possible I got 2Q here and I was just supposed to jam one of our spells, be it the Aria Flame. I think I was supposed to play this untapped or play the Mountain and just jam an Aria Flame here. The Spell Pierce is only going to protect so much. And as we find out later, our opponent has something that we can't even fight over anyway. We go ahead and jam Blood Moon here, which I think was incorrect. I think I was supposed to lead on Aria Flame, and they have a Dovin's Veto. So this kind of sets the awkward situation where now they get to play an untap land and pass. This obviously pretty much means Snapcaster Dovin's Veto, and that's exactly what they do here. Kind of left with an awkward situation. They start beating us down with Snapcaster Mage. We get another land. They have Spell Queller, which we can't hit with that. Opponent starts to attack. We take the hit, hoping they'll tap down on mana. Go to bolt the Spell Queller, getting our Aria Flame back. I want to try to keep this Lightning Axe as an answer to specifically Colonnade. Plays another Snapcaster Mage. Go for the beatdowns. It's probable at this point that I should have tried to kill something. They have another Spell Queller. We try. I should have Lightning Axed that on end step, considering I had the extra land anyway. Gave myself a chance to try to draw another Phoenix. Kill one of their dudes. Chart a course here, trying to churn through the deck. We find Anger of the Gods, which is somewhat relevant against their deck, with Stone Forges and whatnot. And then I untap, they Vendilion click us. Take the Anger of the Gods. I play the Blood Moon anyway. Doesn't really matter at this point. They can't cast anything except Lightning Bolts, but that's the only card that really matters here. And then we draw Force of Negation, and then we're just dead on board. So I should have started jamming spells earlier. Probably should have led on the first copy of Aria Flame. The Blood Moon probably was stuck, and then the game probably would have been over. Obviously, they have 4 cards in hand, so we don't know if they have a Force of Negation or something. But it's just Stone Blades are definitely a thing. I played against one in the MCQ report that I did earlier this morning. Their tempo-y game plan, the Stoneforge Mystic fits in really nicely with it, and they probably most likely have Geists somewhere in their list too, as a way to kind of close out things fast against Tron. But once again, kind of hard to play the tempo game plan when you're not landing threats, and it's possible I should have left in Thing in the Ice, not realizing they were Jeskai. I thought the Thing in the Ice was a little bit more vulnerable than maybe it was, but I'm used to blue-white having multiple pass and possibly Winds of Abandon, whereas Jeskai, a lot of their removals Bolt or Lightning Helix based, so they often have to 2-for-1 themselves to kill it, so I think it was worthwhile possibly leaving Thing in the Ice, but we didn't see any red sources in Game 1, so I boarded it out as if they were just straight blue-white, and maybe we got punished a little bit this game. We're not having enough threats against a slightly more aggressive bent of blue-white Stoneforge with the red splash. So, anyways, on to match number 5. Alright, we're back for the 5th and final match in the league. We'll be on the play this time. Opening hand's pretty reasonable. A little bit late on cantrips, but we do have a Thing in the Ice, a couple redraws with the Fiery Islets. So, go ahead and keep his hand, and obviously Arclight Phoenix could be decent if we happen to draw one of our copies of one of our discard outlets. Unfortunately, we're up against Tron, which kind of continues the trend of this league of really bad matchups. We play a Thing in the Ice and pass. Opponent does the thing, they do the Ancient Stirrings. Find the mine, play the mine. At this point, we kind of got to go for the Desperation Heave here. We don't have Surgicals in our deck, so there's no reason to Thought Scour our opponent. We unfortunately mill a chart a course. Bolt our opponent, gut shot, flip the thing on turn 3 here. Start pressuring our opponent as much as possible. They fortunately don't have a Tron, but what they do have is the ability to chump block with Walking Ballista here, buy themselves a turn. They Ancient Stirrings, still only find a Walking Ballista. Play another Walking Ballista as an answer here. We play Arclight Phoenix and just kind of pressure to kill them here. I mean, obviously this was a very nice start against Tron. Got a little bit lucky, they floundered a little bit, but this is just a reminder that even casting Arclight Phoenixes can be somewhat relevant as far as pressuring your opponent. So, especially once you get a shot or two in with Awoken Horror. Just nice to be able to flip the thing pretty quickly and get our opponent under a lot of pressure. These are the draws we remember as Phoenix players, you know. Awoken Horror plus Arclight Phoenixes. This is why we love the deck, you know. So just a friendly reminder, the deck is still capable of that, just not as consistently, unfortunately. Anyways, we'll get back to sideboarding and get back for game number 2. As far as sideboarding, boarded out the gut shots, the lava dart, copy of lightning bolter 2, brought in some charter courses, brought in things like Blood Moon, Spell Pierce, Force of Negation, anything we can do to disrupt their game plan moving forward, and then just trying to get them dead. Unfortunately, a little bit harder on the draw, obviously. This hand's pretty decent. No immediate game plan, though we do have an Arclight Phoenix potentially if we can find one of our I guess I mulligan that hand because I don't have any type of interaction. No Spell Pierces, no Force of Negations, no Blood Moons. This hand's a lot of the same thing. I think I end up keeping this hand because it is the 6, and we're not going to do much better on 5 anyway. See an Aria Flame, cast a Sleight of Hand, just grab another land, unfortunately. Opponent's going to have Natural Artron on 3. We Thought Scour. Not a whole lot to hit here with 2 Arclights in hand. Opponent cracks their map. They play Walking Ballista. They also play Relic of Progenitus. I scoop to this because at this point, even if they don't find a payoff for a turn or two, our primary plan of finding one of our discard outlets, get Arclight Phoenixes into play. We're just too far behind. They have Natural Tron, so maybe this was a premature concession, but I think this Relic of Progenitus really shut off our most reasonable avenue of play, which was like finding Izzet Charm into maybe, I don't know, hitting some other spells here. So an Aria Flame just isn't going to be fast enough in the face of even Walking Ballista plus just the ability to pump. So we move on to game number 3. Not a whole lot to be said. We just kind of mulliganed a couple mediocre hands and kind of got drawn. So, anyways, game number 3. Game number 3 here. We're on the play. This hand's pretty reasonable if we find a second land. We have a Thing in the Ice here. Manamorphose to help flip it quickly. We have the Shattering Blow for something like a Worm Coil Engine. Force of Negation to protect our Thing in the Ice. We go ahead and crack this. Looking for lands. We hit lands, which is nice. It goes Urza Mine. We play Thing in the Ice. Pass turn. Hoping maybe our opponent wouldn't be a little unlucky here. We pass. It's most likely here I was supposed to be... this was a mistake here. Most likely here I was supposed to be more diligent with potentially trying to flip thing here, because we had 1, 2, 3 spells this turn. And if we hit a land, we could have potentially had a 4th one. So it's probably incorrect here to do that, especially when their threat is like Walking Ballista here, which is annoying. It like plays around our counter spells. I go ahead, do the Manamorphose thing, draw an Arclight Phoenix, draw a discard 2, try and get the Phoenix flip next turn. Doesn't really pay off too well here. Get rid of the Aria Flame because it's probably going to be a little bit too slow in this style of game. Draw the Spell Pierce, which is nice. Go ahead and Sleight of Hand. Grab another land. Thought Scour. I probably should have played this Sleight of Hand here. That would have allowed me to get back the Phoenix, chunk them for 10 here. Instead, I opt to hold up Spell Pierce, which may or may not have been correct. Opponent plays that, we force that, and they turn around and have all his dust. We're able to Spell Pierce. So we get rewarded for the play line we took, but this does mean our clock is extremely slow. Looking for another spell, counter spell there. Opponent is able to deploy Ugin, wipe out our threat. So now we gotta rely on bolts or chaining spells here to get our things back. No reason to run out the Aria Flame. And they play Thragtusk, and that pretty much seals out our only way to win the game. And we draw another Aria Flame and scoop. So it's possible I should have gone more aggressive with the Phoenix there, but either way their life total would have been fairly high. They either would have wiped our board that follow-up turn. All is dust was going to guess either way. So way too much to overcome there. It's possible I should have been more aggressive with the thing the previous turn, which might have been another chunk of damage, but kind of hard to say. I think it might have been correct to go for the aggressive flip the thing plan, but they would have had the walking ballista to chump block anyway, so it doesn't really look like it matters whatever path we took. We were going to lose this game, unfortunately. Just needed to top deck that last either Force of Negation for that Ugin, or find a way to chain together enough spells to bring back our Phoenix that one turn. Maybe like cantrip and the bolt, or something along those lines, but alas, wasn't to be. Rather disappointing 1-4 finish in the league. But I will go to a quick wrap-up video, offer suggestions of where Phoenix might be able to head from here. We've already kind of alluded to some of the possibilities, but go ahead and do a quick wrap-up and kind of show them what direction I'm going to work on for the deck, maybe for the next league or two, see if the deck's maybe even still viable at all. But anyways, let's go to the wrap-up. So we're here to do a quick wrap-up on this Izzet Phoenix League. Didn't go particularly well. I think part of it is the meta itself is shifting. I think part of it is the deck obviously is weaker after the banning of, after the banning of Faithless Looting. A couple different solutions have offered themselves. Obviously, the two most clear paths for the colors and the cards involved can go to the Blue Moon archetype. See if I can pull up a list here. Example of a Blue Moon archetype here is by Jacob Kaminsky, someone who I happen to follow on Twitter. The list he's piloting is like, you're still seeing your Thing in the Ice and Snapcaster Mage combo. This is a deck that uses things like Archmage's Charm, Force of Negation, Cryptic Command, along with a fast copy of Thing in the Ice for Snapcaster Mage, beat down your opponent, kill them pretty quickly. Somewhat similar in nature to the more controlling draws of Blue-Red Phoenix. However, you're giving up the Phoenix package. You're not playing things like Aria Flame. He's been having good success with the deck. You know, things like Remand, Spell Snare, pretty decent in the format currently. Obviously, a lot of people don't want to go toward a more controlling role, especially one that involves 4 Snapcaster Mages. It's kind of expensive, and like one copy of Jace, also pretty expensive, but still a deck that's been doing reasonably well. If you'd like to check out his thing, check out Jacob Kaminsky on Twitter. It's got links to all of his stuff. This is one extreme direction Blue-Red Phoenix players can go without giving up on their, their Scalding Tarns, their Thing in the Ices, but you are completely giving up the Arclight Phoenix. He's been doing well, obviously, with the deck. Archmage's Charm here, stealing a whatchamacallit. His comments Dino is a really good hate bear. Didn't get into play versus Urza, but very solid against the Stoneblade decks and Hardened Scales. The Rampaging Frostodon is the card he's alluding to in his sideboard. This is a card that was just recently unbanned in Standard. It does help prevent things like Batter Skull from gaining life, which is something Burn decks might consider playing. It's something even I might consider playing in Burn at some point, along with Skullcracks to help prevent life gain. This is one direction that the blue-red Phoenix players can go in. Another example is the list Javier Dominguez talked about in his article that's been bandied about. Basically, it's a Pyromancer's Ascension combo with Thing in the Ice as your kind of alternative win con. I talked about earlier in the thing, you're like playing a Pyromancer's Ascension and then trying to set up a combination of Manamorphose and Noxious Revival to continually loop. Build also includes access to Aria of Flame as a kill con, or just basically looping through your entire deck, getting infinite mana, and bolting your opponent to death. That version is infinitely more vulnerable to Graveyard Hate once that starts filtering back into the meta. Once you see things like Urza or Dredge really popping up, there's kind of incentive to run things like Rest in Peace, so that version's obviously a little bit weak to that. There's really no true proven middle ground right now. There is no Arclight Phoenix of the build that people are talking about as a surefire thing. Some people tested like 4 copies of Izzet Charm and had okay success with it. We've gone a couple of leagues here. One went 3-2. Obviously, this one went 1-4. Not the best. Another consideration, and this is something I got from watching on Wyatt Darby stream. The deck was to play a more mid-ranging version of something like Izzet or Grixis. He was obviously streaming Standard, but the idea was like, in my head, was like Thing in the Ice, move copies of Seasoned Pyromancer to the main deck, play Arclight Phoenix, and then maybe a couple Snapcaster Mages. So that gives you your Izzet Charms. Don't always have to be used to discard. You could use them as the other modes, the Shock, the Spell Pierce. And then the Seasoned Pyromancer is another discard outlet to get your Phoenixes in the yard. Also gives you kind of another mid-range threat. Allows you to grind a little bit better against these decks like Jund, Stoneblade, etc. Maybe move the Aria Flames back to the sideboard. And then you can have a game plan of like Thing in the Ice, Seasoned Pyromancer, and then maybe have some like type of like counterspell package like Force of Negations or that kind of stuff in the main deck, and then you still have your Arclight Phoenix plan to help kind of mop up the ending, and then you still have those rare draws where you can put a couple Arclight Phoenixes into play on like turn 3, really pressure your opponent. Gut Shots and Lava Darts have severely underperformed the last couple leagues. There just aren't a whole lot of X1 decks out there right now. I know there are some people trying to think Stoneforge Mystic and like a devoted druid thing. Humans is still around in small numbers, but those decks aren't showing up in huge numbers right now on Magic Online or in paper. So it might be time to put away the free spells. Surgical Extraction's fine on the sideboard. Maybe 1 or 2 Lava Darts, leave them in the main, but I think it's time to put away the free spells and play a little bit more of a true Magic game. Could go for a light black splash for something like Unearth. That way you have the ability to flash back, get another Pyromancer into play, discard a couple of cards, including an Arclight Phoenix that might get stranded in your hand, still get value off of it. Or you can just stick to a blue-red shell, maybe run a couple Snapcaster Mages, maybe consider running Young Pyromancer, so you have a bunch of must-kill 2-drop threats, get on the board early, have a couple counter spells, either Force of Negations or Spell Pierces or Izzet Charms, kind of try to tempo your opponent out a little bit, not unlike some of the plans that some of the Stoneblade decks are doing. With black, you would have access to things like, maybe Inquisition of Kozilek, Collective Brutality, have a little bit more of a interaction game going on. Maybe cut the Aria Flames in the Finale of Promises for now. There was a blue-black Thing in the Ice deck that popped up I think it was this time last year, that was very similar to the Blue Moon archetype. It was playing like things like Gurmag Angler or Tassiger. So there's a lot of different directions where Arclight Phoenix could still be a viable portion of the deck. Just understanding that the Izzet Phoenix deck that we were used to seeing is probably dead. Arclight Phoenix can still be a part of the strategy, but it's got to be part of more of a value mid-range strategy than what we were used to with, flip a thing on turn 3, attack with 2 Arclight Phoenixes, swing for 13, and then the game's over on turn 4. I think those draws can still happen, but they're very rare. And I think we need to acknowledge the fact that if you want to play the Arclight portion of Izzet Phoenix, you're going to have to probably adopt a more mid-range grind value, something along the lines of like a Mardu Pyromancer-esque strategy. Either use discard spells or counter spells to kind of supplement your threats, and maybe try to counter your opponent's key spells for a turn or two and ride a thing in the ice, or ride a Seasoned Pyromancer plus some Arclight Phoenixes to victory, as opposed to trying to flip a thing in the ice quickly or get some Phoenixes into play on turn 2 and beat them down quickly. I think that's kind of the thing we're in. We're either go to the Thing Ascension combo version of the deck, go more controlling towards the Blue Moon aspect, or if you want to be in the middle, you're going to have to find some type of value package with like maybe Seasoned Pyromancer or Young Pyromancer to pair with the Things in the Ice and the Arclight Phoenixes. Yes, I know Thing in the Ice and the Young PZ are a nombo, but Thing in the Ice and then things like Seasoned Pyromancer and Snapcaster Mage might be cooking a little bit there. And then Snapcaster Mage, even with a small black splash to flash back things like Unearth, lots of value to be had there. Say you run in 3 or 4 Seasoned Pyromancer, 3 or 4 Things in the Ice, some number of Snapcaster Mages. It's a lot of reasonable targets for a couple copies of Unearth. You could run Collective Brutality. I think that small black splash might be worth it, but that will take some testing to see if it's worth it, and if that's even something you guys are interested in. If you guys aren't interested in any of this kind of stuff, I won't cover any of it. I'll try to cover either the Blue Moon or the Pyromancer's Ascension combo. Let me know what you guys think, what you guys want to see, and we'll go from there. I'll still continue covering Izzet Phoenix, or the Izzet variations off of that, for as long as there's interest. And as always, I want to thank you guys for tuning in to the video. This has been John from MTG Nexus. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope you all have a great Labor Day here in the US, and have a good day in the world, and prayers to the people down in Florida with the hurricane headed their way. Everybody have a great day.